Our second learning module, Geometry and Construction, features Scott Burke, a skilled trades teacher at Loveland High School in Colorado. 12 years ago, Scott worked with a colleague, a mathematics teacher named Tom Moore, to devise a new way to teach geometry, combining a traditional classroom curriculum with something that struck many at the time as totally off the wall, having 14 and 15-year-old students build from scratch an entire house that would meet building code and actually provide shelter to a needy family. The upshot? Rather than simply learning a concept like similar triangles out of a textbook and then practicing on a worksheet, Scott's students are tasked with actually laying a square foundation in the house that they're building. The age-old question, why do we have to learn this stuff, instantly evaporates. The results of Scott's efforts have been extraordinary, with increased student engagement and improved math achievement. And Scott has learned a host of valuable lessons himself as he has developed and honed a set of teaching practices that are sure to be helpful to all skilled trades educators, whether they're in construction or another field. Today, geometry and construction has been replicated in more than 300 high schools nationwide. If you'd like to dig a little deeper into some of the concepts discussed by Scott, you'll once again find additional material in our resource library. You can use the main menu to click ahead and draw upon this supplemental content to help you answer the relevant application questions, or you can dig in and explore it later at your convenience if you prefer.
In career and technical ed, oftentimes we feel like the ugly red-headed stepchildren of a traditional comprehensive high school, where we don't get an awful lot of attention, we usually don't get an awful lot of funding, and we deal sometimes with teaching students that are disenchanted, I guess, with regular traditional academics. On the math side of things, my teaching partner at the time, Tom, he was beat to death by every year people coming in and being like, what are you going to do to raise those state standardized test scores? How are you going to get kids to pass more math classes? All those kinds of things. I mean, there's a lot of pressure with that. Tom and I basically got together along with some other administrators and said, let's go ahead and clear all of the baggage out. Let's brainstorm what would be the absolute ideal class, not focused on budgets, enrollment, liability, anything. What would it actually look like? For me, as the career and technical ed side, it was definitely, I wanted to do a program that really blew career and technical ed up, being very real world. And what I mean by that is giving kids skills that they can go out and be almost instantly employed with. That was something that was really important. For example, in our traditional construction program here, kids had been building mantle clocks for years. And it hit me my very first year teaching one section of that when I had a parent come in who said, hey, I built that mantle clock when I went to school here, and not only that, this is now the third one in our household because my dad built that when he was here. For me, the problem is that within a 500-mile radius of here, nobody can be employed building mantle clocks. Like, it just doesn't happen. So I said, if we're gonna do this, let's do it so that kids can go out and get real high-skilled, high-wage jobs right now here. On the math side of things, we have to be every bit as rigorous as any traditional math classroom. As a matter of fact, we're the only program that is scrutinized every year where our math scores are compared to every other geometry student district-wide. It was put down as one of the approvals for this program that if our scores ever fell below the performance of traditionally taught geometry, this program would instantly cease to exist. One of the reasons that it took so long is that there really is no geometry book that follows the natural progression of building a house. It doesn't exist. And so that was one hurdle to get through. Of course, dealing with the math department then, it was all about how are you addressing all these different standards. On the CTE side of things, really, I didn't change the standards of construction from what we did. All I did was change the capstone project. But in doing that, it changed 100% of everything that the district had done, because now we're not buying small amount of board feet from a local lumber yard. We're buying entire lumber packages for an entire house. And then there's the logistical parts of How do we move the house? What happens to it afterward? Who's going to buy the house? Who's responsible for the permitting and all those kinds of things? All of that stuff was definitely something that was there. The big takeaway from all of it, though, is that for Tom and I both, we refused to take no for an answer. And that is something that I would impart to any individual that is looking to do something like that, is that you will have, if you start to do something like this, you will have a million no's in front of you, from admin, from folks in the city, from nonprofit organizations that you're trying to partner with, from places where you're going to try to get donations from, and they're going to have a lot of no's for a lot of different reasons. You just have to say, well, what we are currently doing is not working in schools. So what can we do? Because we refuse to take no for an answer. That's really what it took. The first couple weeks, kids would tell you that it's their favorite class because all we do is play games. We do a lot of team building, we do a lot of cooperative group activities, but all of that is with a purpose in mind and an end goal in mind. Our philosophy is that if we can get students to play well together, we can get them to work well together. From there, of course, then we just keep kind of going on. We talk about the fact that this is not make-believe, that you are really building a house for a local family in need, and they are going to be living in this house. So your level of precision has to go way up. You can't play the game anymore of, I can hand this in and it's 70% correct. It's either right or it's wrong. There's really no variation in that. We affectionately, when we're building, we call that the land of tear it apart and do it again. Kids get very used to that. We do an awful lot of construction and then deconstruction and then do it right. Oftentimes in education, we are really good about simulating different types of things for kids. So, for example, one of the things that we were encouraged to do when we first started this was, let's not build a house because it's too much craziness in terms of who's responsible for all these different things. Let's go ahead and just talk to the kids about what you would be doing if you were building a house. Well, Tom and I didn't really like that very much. We said, no, that just doesn't really do it. Like, we want to make sure that the kids actually do it. You know, I mean, if you're going to talk about stairs and you're going to talk about slope and rise over run and all that, why not go out and actually do a lab and actually do it? So in some ways, geometry and construction is much more like a lab science class, in addition to a CTE class, in addition to a math class, in addition to a personal skills class. I mean, it's really a whole number of classes all combined into one. A lot of times people will come and visit here and they'll see, oh my gosh, you guys have this amazing house. But what they don't understand is that we have about 150 students that are working on this house per year. And so it's based on a square footage approximation. So for us, what led us to houses was we had 80 students in the first year. And so we had to go to a house because we knew that we couldn't do tiny homes or sheds and have that be sexy enough for kids to stay engaged through an entire year. So from there, we scaled up after that. So the second year of the program, we had about 120 students. That's what forced us to have to go to a two-box type house where we almost doubled the square footage, and then we haven't looked back since. So we've been fortunate to build for a number of nonprofits. We've done homeless transitional housing through the House of Neighborly Services. We've done Habitat for Humanity. We've also done another organization that did transitional homeless housing too, and they're called Angel House. So we've been really fortunate to do a lot of different nonprofits. But again, it's that refusing to take no for an answer. Everything that we do here in construction, we really have to make it kid-friendly, or what we call kid-friendly and mother-approved, right? Kid-tested, mother-approved. That's what we say all the time around here. So some of that is making it accessible for younger students. So I mentioned before that we have 14 and 15-year-old students that are here. On a normal construction site, one of the big tools that you're going to have to learn how to use would be a big worm drive circular saw. In our program here, we have none of those. And the reason that we don't have any of them is because they're just so bulky and so heavy with kids. On top of that, they're pretty powerful. And so we said, well, if we're going to do this and we're trying to teach them mostly about building a house, but then also doing their own repairs, what types of tools would they be buying? Probably for their home. Basically, we elected to go with battery-operated tools. A little bit smaller, still just as powerful, but it's more accessible for kids. Same thing too with driving nails and doing framing. We don't use a lot of nail guns here, mostly just because of the liability part of it. But we do have something called palm nailers, which palm nailers are nothing more than really a mini jackhammer that fits in the palm of your hand that will drive a nail. The best part of it, it doesn't shoot nails. But kids, I mean, it's a great equalizer to be able to level the playing field for all kids. Boys, girls, it doesn't really matter. They can all be successful. What's really cool about this program is that kids learn an appreciation for each other that they do not normally have with each other. So in the classroom, you might have your traditional book learners who are just great. I mean, they're great at memorization, they're great about following the rules and just doing it. But then you have another group of students that really struggle with the book learning. Once you roll out to the construction site, those two groups completely flip, where the people that struggle sometimes with the book learning are usually your leaders out here on this construction site, and they are amazing at what they do. The biggest pitfall that I see is not from the teachers. It's usually from administration and counseling. And it's that, oh, we have this awesome program. They don't know very much about it usually, and then they'll say, great, we're gonna get that program in place and we're gonna have it be for those kids. I mean, and I've actually sat in meetings before where they describe it as those kids. The problem is that with this program, it's a very rigorous math program. And that's what people have to understand, is that if you turn this into the dumping ground, your lowest level student will only achieve at the highest level of the highest student in that class. And if everyone is low level, you can't expect that you're going to be able to make miracles happen in a year. And I think that's a lot of times what places fall down to, is that they can't overcome that hurdle. I've actually had it before where we've had kids that just want to throw in the towel in the classroom because they're like, oh my gosh, this is just so hard. But I've also seen honors level students out here on this construction site break down in tears because they are just so overwhelmed with outside of that comfort zone for the very first time sometimes in a school setting where, oh my gosh, I am completely like a fish out of water right now. And it's cool to see the students that once they have that relationship in the math classroom come out here and they're like, hey, I can help you. I'll take you under my wing. And so they just learn that mutual respect for each other. But that's not something, I mean, you really have to train kids for that. That's not something where you just put them together and just hope and pray that they work together. Yeah, that's where that training really comes into play, especially early in the year.